As it turns out, Vikings-Rams is going to move to Phoenix, and I'll tell you everything that means here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to my hashtag everydayers, those of you that listen to this show every single day. I appreciate you all so very much. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Today on the show, we've got the Zoever-Under. We've got your bold predictions, but we've also got some news. So the Vikings-Rams game will not be played in Los Angeles. It'll be played in Arizona because of the wildfires going on in LA. They say in the interest of public safety. There's two main reasons why this can happen. One is concern over public resources, the staff and police and fire department and all those presences required at a game maybe we still want to be diverted elsewhere. To me, you got to understand, look, I live in LA, okay? LA is huge. The Eaton Fire, for example, is an hour away from SoFi. There are, I think, a dozen precincts in between Pasadena and Inglewood. So those resources are probably not the first ones that anyone would ask for, but perhaps that's still the concern nonetheless. But the real one to me, I think, is air quality. Again, LA is huge. There's miles between the fires that are, in still proper LA County and where the stadium is at SoFi. And there's a lot of urban between those. And that's going to be slower. If it does get at all, if it even kisses Santa Monica, that's a terrible and horrible tragedy. And because of that, the resources are diverting a lot more toward that border in Santa Monica as opposed to the more rural areas. So I know that a lot of people don't understand this about LA because I've been getting phone calls from people who don't live in LA asking me wait, you're pretty close to that fire. It's no, that's not practically. That said, it still is very much endangering super populous areas of Santa Monica and then up north in Pasadena and Glendale and all of those. And so that has to be the city's priority. But the smoke from those fires, now that the Santa Ana winds have sort of let up a little bit, which makes those fires easier to fight, but also it means that the smoke isn't being narrowly funneled out over the ocean and it's spreading over all of LA. So if you're like me, you live in LA, stay inside, use air purifiers, turn your air conditioning on. If it's the right kind of air conditioning, do your research on what you should do there and keep your lungs safe. But at a certain air quality number, it's just not safe to do exercise. And it's also probably not safe for 60,000 people to pack into an open air stadium and start, hooting and hollering all day. So that is a public safety concern. And they're now making the call to say, let's just not mess with this at all. Let's not hope the wind, if the wind blows the wrong way that day, it could render that stadium completely unusable. So let's not do that, right? Let's just take this to Arizona. It is not the thing that I thought that they would do. To be honest with you, I kind of expected the NFL to not care as much about air quality dangers. The way I think about it is, it's dangerous to be outside with an AQI air quality index over 200, but it's also dangerous to be outside in minus 10 degree weather. And they play those games just fine. And they just kind of expect everybody to protect themselves, wear a mask if you have to, do your thing and or don't come if you're sensitive. And they would just kind of tell everybody to tough it out, but they didn't really approach it that way this time. And that is for the best, for sure. It's for the best for the players. It's for the best for the fans. So here's some logistical things you have to know. If you are like me and you bought tickets to the game, they've said that they'll refund you either just a full refund or a credit towards season tickets for Rams fans that bought tickets to this game. That is that's the plan for actual tickets. And then on Friday at 2:00 Central, tickets will go on sale for the new game. They actually go on sale a couple hours early for Rams season ticket holders if Angelinos want to get out there. But obviously, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the competitive impacts here. I was at the last Rams-Vikings game on Thursday Night Football. I would have called it close to 50-50. I would have given a little bit of an edge to purple, just from my like anecdotal where I was sitting in the concourses I happened to go through. I think ticket sale data showed that there were a few more Rams fans than Vikings fans, but at the very least, it was close. But with ticket sale data from what Doug McCain told me yesterday on the crossover, it would have been a little bit more Rams heavy than Vikings heavy this time. It should maybe show up a little bit more for a playoff game for, the home team will, but there would still be a pretty solid, healthy contingent of Vikings fans there. And that matters a lot for crowd noise and home field advantage and all that. At the last game, there really wasn't a home field advantage, but there wasn't like a disadvantage either. Like I've seen, I'll never forget the Chargers game at StubHub Center a few years ago. The one where Phillip Rivers threw like 4 interceptions, like 7 turnovers. Fadio Denebo had a fumble, scoop and score. You remember that one? That was genuinely 90%. That looked like a Vikings home game. I've never seen anything like it. And it was genuinely loud there when the Chargers had the ball. I wasn't going to exactly expect that. And I still don't quite expect that. But if you don't live in Minnesota, or you don't know a lot of Minnesotans, especially Minnesotans that are older and maybe have a little bit more money, there are a ton of Minnesotans in Phoenix, just a ton. I remember, if you want proof of concept of like how they can take over a late season Cardinals game, 2015, I think, was the last time the Vikings played the Cardinals late enough in the season for it to be cold in Minnesota, because they played week 2 in Arizona a few years ago, but that was still nice. So you didn't have all the snowbirds that had gone south yet. And it was like a full takeover in that game. And that was with, the hometown Arizona Cardinals, not there just will be more Vikings fans in Arizona than Rams fans in Arizona. And it depends on how many Rams fans travel and how many Vikings fans still travel. It also just logistically might be a little bit tougher for Rams fans to get out, because like the Burbank airport, for example, which is a very convenient airport if you live in the valley, to get out, and they run easy flights to Phoenix all the time, but that airport is so close to the Eaton fire that they aren't getting all their flights off. They've actually grounded flights. So like logistically, it will be hard for Rams fans to get out there. So all this is to say, the world expects a fairly significant advantageous effect toward the Vikings for this decision. That's not why anybody did anything. That's of course not anyone's priority. Harrison Phillips even came out. He was asked, but he was talking in his capacity as a union rep, as the NFLPA rep, and he said, it's got to be about public safety, and he mentioned like first responders and all that, and he said, I'm not talking. He was like clear. He's like, I'm not talking as a Minnesota Viking that wants a neutral site, but there are safety reasons to do this. But all that said, the decision is made, it's over, and it will advantage the Vikings. And that's even reflected in the betting lines. I'll give you a little Zoever-Under preview. Usually on the Zoever-Under, we go through all of the betting lines. Here's the rub. I recorded the Zoever-Under and bold predictions before this decision was made, and I'm coming back to re-record this first segment. And I did a whole history thing about the Vikings and Rams that I still will get back to, because we do have another show. So I've still got that on the back burner because a lot of you wanted that. But instead I kind of had to go through this. But in that, I mentioned that the line is 1.5. It is now 2.5. It's gone up a whole point on FanDuel. And the money is minus 120 toward the Vikings, which means that people are still hammering that at Vikings minus 2.5. So the public suddenly likes the Vikings a lot better. And I think that's because they anticipate that the Vikings are going to have something of a home field advantage. Plus, a lot of where the Rams live is being evacuated right now. The Rams facility is in Woodland Hills, California. It's an LA neighborhood that's just north of the Palisades fire. And there was another small fire right near there that got into a lot of the neighborhoods where Rams staffers and players live. And so a lot of them had to evacuate. There's concern about their homes. There's concern about all that. They have they cut their media availability off early. They sent a lot of people home on Thursday, according to Jordan Rodriguez. So the Rams are dealing with this as, I mean, it is a tragedy local to them. And that is going to weigh on the playoff game. And how that affects people on the field, it's everyone's last concern. But it is a more emotional challenge than a physical one for them. And some people rise to that and some people don't, but it's context that will sort of drape itself over this game. But I don't want to be a huge bummer. That's, I think, everything you guys need to know. If you do want tickets, you can get them 2 p.m. Central on Friday. If you already bought tickets, you are eligible for a refund, so go get that. And otherwise, the game hasn't moved time. If you were just planning to watch it on TV, it's just going to look a little different on your TV, and that's kind of all that's going to matter to you, and it's going to sound a little different with more purple in the stands. So that is, I think, everything. If I missed anything, let me know, and I'll circle back to it on Monday. If you had any other questions about it, maybe we'll even do like a Monday mailbag. But now let's move on to some actual predictive stuff about this game, including the Zoever-Under and your bold predictions. That'll be next. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. If you're tired of endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes, let TurboTax take care of the confusion for you. Taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. You're not waiting for answers. You're not wondering if you're missing out on savings or worrying about deadlines or anything like that. Whether you've got one form or 20, TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention, and you can get real-time updates on their progress so you know exactly what's going on, when it's going on, and what you need to do when. But you won't need to do very much. You'll get peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by a pro. If you're ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed, head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. This episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. If you're like me during the playoffs, if the Vikings aren't playing in a playoff game, you don't really have a stake in it. I'm not trying to stress out about what the easiest matchups are or rooting for seeding or anything like that. I just want to see good ball. And what helps me is to have a little something going on. PrizePicks has been that for me all season long. All you got to do is pick 2 to 6 of your favorite players and whether they'll do more than or less than their PrizePicks projection. Just you versus the house. And you can get a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. I've been making a lot of use of the demons and the goblins. Those are alternative projections that have different payouts. So the goblins are more conservative with smaller payouts. I do those a lot, and then you can stack more of them up and then get a payout that you still feel like pretty good about. Or if you're feeling a little more aggressive, you can go for a demon. And here is a special offer for Locked On Vikings listeners. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. If you liked that little story time, if you had a good time there, there's 7 hours of that on my Patreon page. There is a documentary series that I made a couple of years ago. It's completely free to watch, 7 episodes, around an hour each, going through the entire history of the Minnesota Vikings. Every little anecdote I just told comes up in that, as well as everything else that happened over all of the years. So if you like a little history lesson and you're looking for something to do all weekend while you wait for the Vikings, then you should go check that out. Now, it's time for the Zoever-Under. As always on the Zoever-Under, we will be using FanDuel's lines to get a sense for, not necessarily, I'm not telling you what I think you should bet or not. You don't want to listen to that from me. But I'm telling you what the public kind of thinks about this game and where they're at in terms of what kind of game we might be in for. So the spread for this one is the Vikings. They are favored by 1.5. The over-under for this game is 47.5, so the implied final score prediction from the public you could call like a 24-23 Vikings victory. A close one, very medium. You're kind of in the mid-40s, maybe on the high end a little bit, but a very kind of, hey, we think it's going to be a close game, and they don't really see any particular offense versus defense extreme result happening. Unlike last week where the spread was at 57, and we didn't even get close to that because the Vikings offense, hit just about every single under. Had a bad day, it happens. But because it's the playoffs, you get all kinds of these fun little ones, like who's the first player to catch a pass? And that's Puka Nacua is minus 163 for that, with the Rams, and for the Vikings, Justin Jefferson is minus 125 for that. That's interesting to me, like a lot more confidence in them starting the things with Puka Nacua. And while it's just the first pass, and I'm probably that just maps out off of who gets the most passes and you're just playing the odds, I still kind of feel like there is something to, okay, they're going to try to get Jefferson going as like a thing the public expects. They're going to try to get Puka going as like a thing the public expects. I always like to look at the touchdown scorers for these. Obviously, Kyren Williams has been one of the shortest odds touchdown scorers all year long. He's very good for a touchdown just about every game. And no surprise here, he's minus 150. Justin Jefferson, minus 105. Puka Nacua is plus 100. And Aaron Jones and Jordan Addison are plus 130 and plus 145. So touchdowns for the Rams seem to be more likely than touchdowns for the Vikings, even though the Vikings have, slightly higher scoring odds. In terms of passing, though, and just like passing efficiency, not necessarily the same thing. In terms of just yards, Sam Darnold's line is at 265.5, while Matthew Stafford's is at 235.5. So Darnold's is above Stafford. And in terms of TDs, both of the lines are set at 1.5, but Sam Darnold's is at minus 168, while Matthew Stafford's is at minus 114, which is about, when it's like minus 110, minus 114 at FanDuel, that's basically them saying it's a coin flip and we want to shave a little off the top no matter who wins. But when it's minus 168 for Sam Darnold, that means lots and lots of people are betting that Sam Darnold will get 2 or more passing touchdowns. So there's more touchdowns to go around, but the touchdown scorers themselves are less clear on the Vikings. So I think what that is telling us is that the Vikings they do a better job of spreading the wealth. But if the Rams are scoring a touchdown, it's Puka or it's Kyren Williams, and anybody else is kind of a long shot. Maybe there's a Demarcus Robinson. Cooper Kupp has fallen completely out of this. And just to show you, Cooper Kupp's total is 46.5. That's closer to TJ Hawkinson's, which is 41.5, than it is to Puka's, who is 88.5. So Puka has clearly emerged as the top receiver. And if you play any fantasy or if you're on, FanDuel at all, that's definitely not news to you. But Puka's line is almost twice as much as Cooper Kupp's line. That's crazy. I like to look sometimes at longest reception for people. Justin Jefferson's is longer than Jordan Addison's, even though Jordan Addison's kind of the boomer bust guy. 16.5 for TJ Hawkinson. It's 21.5 for Addison and 26.5 for Jefferson. And then if we really want to look at the rushing props, it's 81.5 rushing yards for Kyren Williams and 59.5 for Aaron Jones. So maybe this is starting to clarify into the Rams being a little bit more of a run-heavy team. So there's a lot more, if they're going to have a goal line rep, they expect it to be a rushing touchdown. If they're going to get yards, they expect it a little more to be rushing yards than, and the passing game is lower. The Rams have higher running numbers all over the place and lower passing numbers all over the place. So the Vikings are the passing team, the Rams are the running team. And that really sort of jives with what we talked about on the crossover yesterday, which is that these two teams are really opposite of each other. The Vikings are high-flying, aggressive, take risk. And the Rams are a lot more about being a steady Eddie and playing a little bit more conservative ball. And I think what that means is that this is a Vikings game more than a Rams game, that if the Vikings lose, it's because their risks didn't pay off. And if they win, it's because their risks did pay off. And I think the Rams are content to let the Vikings hoist themselves by their own petard. And hey, if you beat us, you beat us. That feels like the game plan kind of coming into this one, almost a challenge to the Vikings that says, I bet you're going to get in your own way. I don't know if that's how I would approach the Vikings, but it does seem like that's the way the Rams are approaching a lot of these games. And to their credit, it worked last time. The last thing we do here on the Zoever-Under is the Rabbits pick the game. As always, it's a little hard to get them to cooperate here because sometimes they just don't really like it. ZD, that's never a problem with him. He runs directly up to the watercress it was today for the Vikings and takes a little of that. Also takes some from the Rams, but he went Vikings first. Zoe, a bit more discerning. She sniffs around, she thinks about perhaps eating the paper on the plate instead of the watercress, and then eventually gets sick of the whole thing and runs away kicking. That is a refusal to pick, and we haven't seen many of those from Zoe before, but she will do this sometimes. It just means she's not in the mood to cooperate, and she's gonna go do something else. And every time she does that, it means this game is gonna be bad. Call it a bet for the under. It's gonna be like a slop fest weird one. The circumstances for that certainly make sense with the Rams practice schedule being messed up because of the fires and travel maybe being weird. Maybe this thing goes to Phoenix. The circumstances certainly make sense there, but the prediction itself is hard to parse. We'll call that Zoe calling the under, and ZD takes the Vikings plus 1.5. Next up, your bold predictions on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. There are upsets, big game-winning drives, huge moments, and FanDuel is there through all of it with the playoffs. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. So if you want to take on any of the lines that we just talked about on the Zoever-Under, if you like them, if you want to do parlays, alt lines, right? Get some more conservative lines, but stack up, 3 or 4 of them. I like the Puka lines. I like the TJ Hawkinson lines for this one for 40 plus or 70 plus for Puka, that kind of thing. If whatever it is you want to do, whatever your style is, visit FanDuel.com and join today. You can get started once again with $200 in bonus bets, no matter if your first bet wins or loses. It's just some money for you to start out with at FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Moving right along here with the Locked On Vikings podcast, it is time for your bold predictions. And the first thing we got to do here, we got to get out of the way the bold predictions from the Detroit Massacre nightmare game. The first one came from Ryan L., who said that Justin Jefferson averages 182 receiving yards, but no touchdowns in games in Detroit, and that this game would increase his yards per game, but decrease his touchdowns per game. Unfortunately, you only hit one of those. Shane McHugh almost happened, said if there's a Gink 6 against the Lions, he would get a Minnesota Vikings tattoo on his butt. Boy, aren't you lucky that Gink dropped that one. Smart guy Ryan says that the Vikings hadn't beat the Lions since 2022 week 3 and that they would win by 29 points, which is the combined point differential of those first 4 games. Well, now there's a 5th one. Sam Root said that Jefferson entering week 18 with 1,479 yards, 133 behind Chase, and he would get at least 258 to pass Anthony Carter for 3rd in Vikings history and spoil his college teammates' Triple Crown campaign. We didn't get any of that. Tim Pietz said a Detroit offensive lineman would score the game-winning touchdown. They did not need to do anything like that. We got just only Gibbs touchdowns. It was the only player to score a touchdown the whole game. Shadow said that the Vikings' largest lead of the game would be 13 points and that the Lions' largest game would be 5 points. Didn't get there. And I kind of worked together with the Duck to do one that said every Pro Bowler would score. But again, we only got Gibbs. So the weirdness about whether O-line counts or not ends up moot. All right, wild card round against the LA Rams. The first one comes from Charles, who says that every number on Darnold's stat line is within 5% of his numbers from the first game, but the Vikings win this one. For reference, that stat line was 18 of 25 for 240, two touchdowns, no picks. So we'll probably have to have 2 touchdowns, no picks again, and then somewhere around 240 yards, 18 of 25. I'll say the completion percent maybe is the one we want to go for, which should put all of those are what go into passer rating. So passer rating should be within 5% as well, unless we get into some weird Simpsons paradox territory I don't fully understand. But you got to have the Vikings win. That's a perfectly reasonable stat line to have. And I do think that if that happens, it kind of does become the narrative. So even though that's not that bold of a stat line, the specificity of it is bold, and which I don't usually go for because specificity doesn't become a story all that often, but I do think it would here. Another one from Sam Root. He says that Darnold will record a game-winning drive, and on that drive will throw for over 100 passing yards. I love the chaos of that. Really, the only way to get that to happen is it was some kind of penalty yardage and a backed-up drive to begin with, and of course on a game-winning drive. I'll say go-ahead drive, because game-winning drive can get to be this weird border, but I'll say any fourth quarter go-ahead drive, I will say could be game-winning. If it's over 100, I'm going to say you got that. If you got an over 100 yard fourth quarter to go ahead, I'm not going to say, haha, I got you if the Rams go down and kick a field goal anyways, and it didn't turn out to be a game-winning drive. Organic Bruh says that Justin Jefferson will break the team record for playoff receiving yards. Bonus points if you can name the game. You probably can. It's the Anthony Carter 227 yarder against San Francisco from the 1987 season that brought him to the NFC Championship. So 227 is the line to hit here. It does feel like a JJ game, doesn't it? The way that Doug talked to me yesterday on the crossover was yeah, they're just going to play quarters. It's well, we got beaters for that, man. We've been beating up on that all year long. Kyle Barker says that Earth, Wind & Fire has 33 Billboard Hot 100. This is low-key a fire one. I didn't want to do a fire one because it's pretty sad and it's in my neighborhood. But I do like the way that this one was structured, just about the band Earth, Wind & Fire. And so I kind of say I filled my quota for this one without making fun of people who are losing their homes. But this is Earth, Wind & Fire has 33 Billboard Hot 100 hits, 7 top 10 hits, and 1 number 1 hit, Shining Star. So Aaron Jones will be the Shining Star. This is an Aaron Jones one. We'll have at least 100 rushing yards, 7 receptions, and 1 touchdown. And he says he hasn't had a game with 7 receptions in 2 years. Does not get that many receptions. That is a ridiculous line, and obviously parlaying the 3 of them together, I'm going to give you this. And sure, we'll go with the Earth, Wind, & Fire game. Shadow Flame says that the last time the Rams and Vikings played in the playoffs, the greatest show on turf showed up and won 49-37, as we discussed earlier. Darnold will follow in Warner's footsteps, throwing for 5 touchdowns and an over 75% completion perspective. The Vikings have some parallels to this greatest show on turf that are worth mentioning. That they are the 1999 Rams were the team that previously held the record for the most wins over their preseason expectation, their Vegas betting line. They went, I think, 6 or 7 games over, and the Vikings beat that obviously by going 8 games over. And there are, I think, a lot of parallels about the way, nobody expected this from Kurt Warner. Kurt Warner it was probably more like a Brock Purdy thing, where he was the backup and everybody kind of expected, the starter got hurt and everybody expected them to just kind of trudge through with subpar quarterbacking from a nobody. And then Kurt Warner turned out to be a really good quarterback and nobody really knew it. So there's kind of it's not quite there because Sam Darnold had a pedigree and Kurt Warner very much didn't. But there are definitely parallels between the stories of these two teams. Ross says that after a week of people questioning not running in goal-to-go situations, the Vikings will run in 4 touchdowns, 1 for each touchdownless red zone trip last week. I'm going to add one stipulation to this just to make it spiritually work, that these all have to be from goal-to-go situations. A 30-yard breakaway rushing touchdown will not count for you here. They have to run in 4 touchdowns. That would also very much, that would be very cathartic for what the Lions just did to them. After you had Jahmyr Gibbs score 4 rushing touchdowns on you, now how about put up 4 rushing touchdowns on somebody else? And I get at least one more chance. I still get chances to beat these bold predictions and get out of my eggs punishment for as long as the Vikings are playing games. So in what could be the last chance, hopefully isn't, I will run one back from Pete Bursich, who came on the show earlier in the year and said that TJ Hawkinson would have a career day. I'm going to run that right back. That could be 14 receptions. That could be a career high in rushing yards. It could be a career high in touchdowns, something that can be reasonably described as a career day. And if I hit that, then I don't have to do the eggs. This game does, it could definitely be a Hawkinson game if the Rams successfully bracket Justin Jefferson a lot. And sometimes it's almost up to the Vikings a little bit. Sometimes Sam Darnold just doesn't want to test those, and sometimes they want to force it and they want to beat those brackets. And sometimes Justin Jefferson does run a route that gets open against two guys, like he can mess with their leverage enough. But sometimes they just play it so conservatively that Hawkinson's wide open all day long, and that's the kind of game they could have had last time if Sam Darnold could have hit those throws. Hawkinson was open all day long. I think he's playing really, really good football right now, and it's just getting a little underrated because of some high-profile moments where he couldn't quite snow cone it, like fingertip it, and a lot of wide-open reps and really, really, really good routes that just go wasted because of other stuff going on the offense. All right, everybody, we will get to talk one more time, so I'll try to do a more kind of true blue preview of this one on Monday morning, and then of course we'll do the postcast and everything else after that. I will be at SoFi. If you see me, please say hi. I'd love to hear from you guys, but that means that from the postcast, I'll probably be doing it from like the parking lot from the car. So we'll work all that out, and then hey, whatever happens next week happens next week. Okay, we'll get through it all together. Love you all. Have a great weekend. Stay safe if you're in the LA area. I know I will. And as always, Skol.